We are seeing, I think, an escalation of a techno-economic nationalism that I think it's a new paradigm. But Europe, to be honest with you, I think at the moment is not sitting at the table where the game for our future is designed and discussed. We are not there. We are not at the table. So we are a pawn in a US-China tech war.
Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Ausgabe von Handelsblatt Disrupt, dem Podcast über neue Ideen, Disruption und die Zukunft der digitalen Welt. Mein Name ist Sebastian Matthes und ich begrüße Sie wie immer ganz herzlich aus unserem Podcast-Studio hier in Düsseldorf. Europa sitzt nicht am Tisch, an dem die Zukunft gestaltet wird. Zu diesem Schluss kommt mein heutiger Gast. Und Francesca Bria weiß, wovon sie spricht. Sie ist nämlich eine der führenden politischen Beraterinnen für digitale Politik in Europa. Sie ist Innovationsökonomin und Autorin des Eurostack Reports, einer Studie, die in Brüssel und in Berlin für ziemlich viel Wirbel gesorgt hat. Das nicht ohne Grund, denn Bria zufolge bezieht Europa heute mehr als 80% seiner digitalen Technologien aus den USA und aus China. Eine Abhängigkeit, die im KI-Zeitalter noch viel größer werden könnte und die zunehmend auch unsere Demokratie und unsere innere Sicherheit gefährdet. Doch wie könnte ein technologisch unabhängiges Europa eigentlich aussehen? Ein Europa, das sich von US-Tech-Giganten und chinesischen Rohstoffen löst. Ich habe Francesca Bria gefragt, warum sie eigentlich davon überzeugt ist, dass Europa im technologischen Wettlauf der Tech-Supermächte nicht nur irgendwie mithalten kann, sondern ihn sogar gewinnen kann. Wir haben außerdem über den Einfluss von Mario Draghi auf ihre Karriere diskutiert, über ihre Erfahrungen in Italien während der Berlusconi-Zeit und darüber, warum sie glaubt, dass es im Zollkonflikt mit Donald Trump weniger um eigentlichen Handelskonflikt geht, dafür mehr um Souveränität.
Nach einer kurzen Unterbrechung geht es gleich weiter. Bleiben Sie dran.
KI ist Ihr Thema? Dann ist das Ihr Netzwerk. Der Handelsblatt KI-Circle. Hier verknüpfen wir KI-Experten und Entscheider und diskutieren auf Augenhöhe. Lernen Sie von den Besten und stellen Sie mit uns die Weichen für eine erfolgreiche Zukunft mit KI. Praxisnah, verständlich, innovativ. Erweitern Sie Ihr Wissen und Ihr Netzwerk und werden Sie Teil unserer Community. Mehr Informationen unter handelsblatt.com/KI-Circle.
Wir sind an Ihrer Meinung interessiert. Bei unserer großen Handelsblatt-Umfrage möchte unsere Redaktion erfahren, welche Themen Sie bewegen, was wir künftig tun können, um Sie noch besser begleiten und informieren zu können und was Sie eigentlich von gutem Journalismus erwarten. Als Dankeschön für Ihre Teilnahme können Sie das Handelsblatt, gedruckt oder digital, 4 Wochen lang zum Vorteilspreis lesen. Mehr dazu unter handelsblatt.com/Umfrage und natürlich hier in den Shownotes. Und damit jetzt zu meinem Gespräch mit der Innovationsökonomin und Politikberaterin Francesca Bria. And now let's switch to English. Hello, Francesca.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So, your mother was an Olympic gymnast, your father a renowned psychoanalyst, and their circle included opera conductor Giuseppe Zinopoli. How can I imagine sitting at the dinner table with the young Francesca Bria and her family?
Yes. So thanks for starting from a very personal anecdote. But yes, I think I grew up in a very interdisciplinary, but also creative and at the same time rigorous environment because my father, as you said, is a psychoanalyst, but also a scientist, a doctor. But he's fond of opera and classical music. So he used to be the best friend of Giuseppe Zinopoli. That is one of the geniuses, I think, of Italian opera and Italian classical music. And so I used to tour with them when I was very young. I went to Osaka. I remember with him in an all orchestra tour about, it was all Wagner and Mahler and Verdi. And, so this very much shaped my imagination. But on the other side, I grew up with a very rigorous training of my mom. So she was not only an Olympic gymnast, but she was also my trainer. So I used to be the Italian national champion of gymnastics, believe it or not, when I was very young. So until I would say 16 years old, I would spend 8 hours a day in the gymnastics, doing gymnastics.
So there was discipline at the one hand side. There were rich conversations at the dinner table and some rebellion. So how did this childhood shape you and your views in the coming years?
Yeah, I think for me, this was really important, the combination between science and arts, as I would put it. And I think even today, I work a lot at the intersection between science, technology, and the arts. So I think I realized very early that scientific thinking, scientific breakthrough can only happen in the intersection with humanistic thinking, with creativity, with the arts. I think this is really a European way.
And now we fast forward to the February 2025 when you published the Eurostack report. What exactly is the Eurostack?
The Eurostack is Europe's plan to regain technological sovereignty and doing that layer by layer, from compute to cloud, to artificial intelligence and data, in order to regain resilience, industrial competitiveness, and democracy, defend democracy. Because if big tech manipulate our data and use it against our democracy, we need to be able to provide European alternatives.
So this one was widely referred to as the Bria report. Talk a little bit about how this report actually happened and how you became the person to actually write about this so important topic for the European future.
Yeah, so first of all, I think it's important to understand also the background in that respect, because if you look at my career, even in 2016, when I was the chief technology officer of the city of Barcelona, so I want to say that I was an academic before and I worked on these things in theory, but I always tried to make it work in practice. So 10 years ago, my focus was on two things, which was data as a public infrastructure, let's say, so data as a common asset for mobility, for climate change, for citizen participation. And so I also created a cryptographic platform that enable users to keep control over their personal data, but at the same time for the data to be used to do important public policies. And then when I moved on from there, I went because of Draghi nominated me as the President Draghi, when President Draghi was the President of Italy, the Prime Minister of Italy. I was nominated to become the first actually President of the first Italian National Innovation Fund, which is a venture fund that was shaping the Italian innovation ecosystem. So I also worked at a European level on, creating national champions and European champions, technological champions. So I got to the point of European technological independence or European technological sovereignty after having tried a lot of that at a local scale, at a national scale, and working a lot with the European policymakers, the European Commission, and the European also investment fund and investment bank. So I think that was mature for me to put forward a plan, because I think what we are trying to say in that report is that Europe needs a plan. It needs an industrial strategy that is able to mobilize European power to create, the kind of innovation ecosystem and sovereign infrastructure that we need in order to be, I would say, more autonomous, but also resilient, but also to be able to be competitive and to maintain our security and to defend democracy ultimately.
We will talk about your findings in detail, definitely, in this podcast. But before that, how did you get to know Mario Draghi?
Well, he became the Prime Minister of Italy. And at that point, I was working with the United Nations because after my Barcelona experience, the UN asked me to create a plan for smart cities globally. And then one day I received a phone call from the Minister of Finance, the Treasury at that point, from Italy. And they asked me, well, we are now really want to create a government that does important things in Italy. And we're looking at what are the talented Italian people that are abroad. And we will ask you to engage in this very important mission.
So there's another well-known man from Italy that somehow shaped your thinking, maybe in a little bit different way. You were born and raised in Rome at a time when much of Italy's politics were shaped by Silvio Berlusconi. So what impact did that environment have on your personal development?
Right. So I think that Berlusconi, for me, was the man that pioneered the translation of, the combination of a media empire, so media concentration with political influence. So I remember I grew up under his TV empire, and obviously also that was not very easy for a woman. Because the Italian media landscape was shaped by a very, I would say, macho aesthetics, patriarchal, we will say today. So that was very difficult. But also, I think it made me really understand that we have to protect independent media and that we have to limit the concentration of power in the media, because once you have that concentration of power, it becomes political power.
Berlusconi's family holding company acquired more than 70% of German broadcaster ProSiebenSat.1. I'm sure you are aware of that. What does that mean for the European and especially the German media landscape?
Yeah, I think I maybe have to repeat what I just said, because I think the problem is that if we give in to too much media concentration, corporate concentration, and that linked to the political influence. For example, the Berlusconi family at the moment is still the first shareholder of the the center-right political party that's in the coalition with Prime Minister Meloni. And I think they have a very strong view on politics and what needs to happen. And also, as I said, they are a very strong voice in the Italian national broadcasting situation. So I really think that defending independent, high-quality journalism, it's one of the key things for democracy today.
Okay, and what has to happen that media companies will still be able to do that?
Well, I think we need bold investment. We need the kind of policies like the European Media Freedom Act. And we not only need the policy on papers, we need to implement them, which is one of the problems we're having in Europe, that we've been, for example, the last 5 years legislating to basically create some common laws on the digital economy. And now we risk not enforcing these laws because of the current geopolitical situation. So we need not only to have the right laws and the right legal framework, but also to implement those laws and to be bold in the way we invest in the direction we think we should be going.
So you think there should be political investment in journalism?
Well, I think there is already political investment in journalism. I mean, both in public broadcasting, but also, different states have different laws on how they invest in journalism. But I think we have to preserve independent journalism. So even if we have public investments, which I think is the case, by the way, I don't shy away from saying that I think we should put public investments to fund the critical infrastructure of our society. But I think the safeguard should be in the governance, because obviously we have to limit the political interference in journalism as in many other fields. So the ability to preserve, again, independent, high-quality journalism, pluralism, and the independence of the editorial line is the most important thing.
Because I think many media companies also got into trouble in the last, let's say, 10 or 20 years because they just failed to innovate and failed to understand where users were going. So I am just a little bit critical of state funding of journalism because this doesn't necessarily drive innovation and doesn't necessarily keep people where journalism is, right?
I think the two things can go together, should go together. And I think actually we can discuss one example. Now we have seen that the European Commission has fined Google 295 billion, if I'm not wrong, for abusing the dominance ad tech, which is actually very relevant to the conversation we are having because this advertising system and their dominance has shaped the way that, you know, the publishers, but also the readers and the advertisers have been behaving in digital ecosystems. And my reaction to that is that on one side is a good news, and I think it's a good news exactly for publishers, for readers, and for the advertisers. But at the same time, we understand the limits of this kind of measure and think that those kind of fines for Google are really pocket change. And also we see the limit of antitrust measures when those monopolies are getting so powerful. So if you look at the remedies in the case of this European case, but also what's happening on the other side of the Atlantic, you see that the remedies are kind of cosmetic, I think. So they're not very structural. So there is no proposed break, for example, or structural separation that in the case of Google was advocated. There is no ban on self-preferencing so that they can, you know, with their technology that they own, they can give the preference to their own ad services. And there is no end, for example, to the multi-billion deal that they have with Apple to remain the default. So I think even here that, for example, in the past, you would see courts breaking up Standard Oil or AT&T and really fight the monopolies with antitrust. But I think that today what we see is that the regulators are asking politely these monopolies to behave better. And I think that this fines, if we don't do any structural measures, are just modest tax to keep the monopoly profits flowing. So what I'm trying to say is that in my view, and that's why it's connected to the previous conversation we were having, we have to do at least two things. Stop these big tech companies to acquire startups that can be promising. Yes, because we want to create the next generation startups that are able to challenge these monopolies and compete for real. But on the other side, we have to develop European alternatives. That is the mantra that I'm going on, talking about right now.
We will talk about the question how that actually works in a minute. But before that, it's interesting that you mentioned the 2.95 billion fine from the European Commission, because after the news came out last week, Donald Trump threatened substantial tariffs against countries that impose digital regulations on United States tech companies. What were you thinking when you heard this news?
Yeah, I was thinking that the mask came off. Maybe we didn't expect this was happening so fast, but we saw that coming. And I think that if we are if we are threatened, our regulators are threatened to implement, to enforce our digital laws, this is certainly not a trade deficit. This is a sovereignty deficit. And I think we should be very clear in responding to this threat. But I don't think this is the only thing that happened, because in the same context, we have seen that the US and the EU signed a trade deal where we gave in a lot of concession to Mr. Trump. And in particular, what we're talking about, Europe is now committed to buy 40 billion of advanced AI chips from the US, which of course will deepen the dependency we have on AI infrastructure. We also are seeing an escalation in the US-China trade war, in particular on chips and advanced AI infrastructure. So the geopolitical game, I think, is very fired up. So we are seeing the US actually releasing an AI action plan that talks about AI dominance, the US AI dominance. And of course, China responded back by banning access to the rare earth, gallium, all the rare earth germanium that we use and our companies are using for the clean transition and the digital transition, in particular the automotive, of course, sector. And so we are seeing, I think, an escalation of a techno-economic nationalism that I think it's a new paradigm. But Europe, to be honest with you, I think at the moment is not sitting at the table where the game for our future is designed and discussed. We are not there. We are not at the table.
And if you not
so we are a pawn in a US-China tech war.
If you not sit at the table, you stand on the menu. So
exactly.
What does it actually mean for Europe? I mean, when we look at the numbers also in your report, over 80% of Europe's digital technologies are being imported, mainly from the United States and China. Microsoft alone controls almost 70% of the European market for desktop operating systems, and we can go on and on and on. What has to happen that Europe can change this role?
Yeah, so first of all, maybe for the audience, we should repeat what the numbers are in terms of dependency, because I think people need to understand what this means for their economic security, for the defense of democracy, for industrial competitiveness. So when you have 90% of your cloud data that's processed by a foreign provider. I mean, in this case, the entire EU cloud market is captured by 3 US big tech players. We can also name them, I guess. This is AWS, Microsoft, and Google.
Yeah.
Then we have the chips, which are really the brain of the digital economy. And we know that 90% of the chips we need to power our factories, our energy grid, to keep our society basically up and running, 90% come from Asia. Actually, 2 countries, also one Taiwan, which is very politically unstable, and South Korea. Then if we move to the AI, that now we have a AI boom. We can agree that we are in an AI boom, and let's see when this bubble will bust, if it will bust. But certainly we are looking at a magnitude scale of investment, which I think it's unprecedented. I don't know if you agree with me, but I consider this kind of unprecedented in the history of the Industrial Revolution, the scale of the investment in the AI infrastructure. If we look at AI, we see that AI infrastructure, so the data centers, the chips, and the advanced chips and the AI models, they're overwhelmingly coming from the US, and China is catching up at full speed, while Europe is still nowhere. So again, coming back to my report, the reason why we define the digital stack as a new architecture of modern power is because we think that who control the stack can exercise real power in today's geopolitical environment.
Why is that so difficult to understand for Europeans? So it's not a German problem, it's not an Italian problem, it's not only Brussels. So what is different in Europe compared to the United States and China?
Well, I think the difference is the geopolitical game is today different. Sovereignty has become something that we gave for granted after the Second World War, and we thought that our American friends were always going to take care of it. And now that we see a change in Washington policy and actually a clear attack to some of the fundamental rules, laws, and values, I think that Europe is understanding that you can't just compete on cheap cost and you can't just compete on export of an open globalization world, but that the game is really changing. And that at the core of it, we have the question of who controls the critical technologies of our time. And I just want to stress the fact that this is not just another industry, because when at the core of an industry, you have the processing of data and information are power and are power about our people. So we've seen that you can manipulate, for example, social media data and interfere in an election, as it happened in Germany, by the way, because the data that we have been analyzing from X are pretty clear. There was an attempt to manipulate the outcomes of the elections in Germany. So this can be also kind of regime change operations if you do not have control of the critical infrastructure. So a democracy that doesn't control the critical digital infrastructure is a democracy at risk.
And behind that is also the fact that it's difficult for Europeans to understand the impact of emerging technologies. And this is also something you can see all over Europe.
Yes.
How do you explain that? Some scholars say the reason is that Europe has been so successful with technologies from the past that they somehow didn't see the future coming. Is that a reason? What do you think?
I would say, yes, we, on some level, we were good in the old game. And we didn't master the new one. The internet, for example, consumer applications, and so on. But I think also there are more profound problems here. And I stress a lot, for example, even before when we spent the last 5 years in Europe, very focused on regulation. So I am in favor of good regulation. Good regulation means that it's a regulation, for example, in the case of the digital world, that make Europe understand, that make it possible that our data protection laws, our AI Act, our Digital Service Act, even the digital service tax can be a competitive advantage for Europe. Yes, can be a competitive advantage. But that can only happen if you go beyond regulation. So you're not only regulating foreign monopolies, but you are building your own capabilities. So I have to say that we stopped doing a European-wide industrial policy long time ago. And in particular, we favored incumbent industries.
Exactly, that was
like
the problem.
Automotive and others. Yeah. But we didn't bet on the new ones.
Yes.
We didn't do an industrial policy that would enable us to have the capabilities and to invest, because I keep saying this. So if you look, for example, all the talent that we have in Europe, our deep tech ecosystem, yes, I think we can agree, both of us, but in general, that we have one of the most competitive deep tech ecosystem in the world. Our researchers, even if you take, not only advanced robotics, biotech, quantum, but even if you take AI, some of the best researchers and even some of the best researchers that are working in big tech companies are European. Yeah. The only thing is that they are in Seattle or in Silicon Valley. And I say all the time, be careful, because that's not only a brain drain, that's it's an investment gap. And this is also what Professor Draghi says in his report very clearly. So while China and the US have been investing massively in frontier technology, and today we see that the key Cold War, if you want to call it, I don't really like this term, but you want to say the key tech war is around who control intelligence and compute. And Europe, no, we haven't invested. So we didn't believe, let's say we've done one thing. We funded fundamental research, because we did. We have an Horizon Europe program. I don't want to go into technicalities of 100 billion. Maybe we could have done better, but we have been funding basic research. But then we said, let the market create the champions.
Exactly. And
this didn't happen.
And exactly. Let's talk about how this Euro stack can actually come into place. So first of all, what is part of this Euro stack? And second, how can a political structure enforce that this will actually happen?
Yes. So maybe if you allow me, just if we have some time, I just wanted, before we get to the Euro stack, I wanna mention one thing, because I think it's important that people realize the game and the scale that we are looking at the moment. So if you see the investment, the investment that's going into AI, data centers, semiconductors, and energy today, yes? So we are seeing like a mobilization of hundreds and hundreds of billions, but also even we are seeing entire sovereign wealth funds. I mean, not only in US and China, but think about Saudi Arabia, think about the Emirates, think about Singapore. So entire sovereign wealth funds are being repurposed to bankroll artificial intelligence as the new oil. I mean, I just want to make this example because then, people are not going to tell us that, why do you want to do this in Europe? Take Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia is building a 6.6 gigawatts AI factory of compute by 2034. I mean, 6.6, yes. And they are powering that with their sovereign wealth fund of 940 billion. And they're partnering with NVIDIA, with AMD, with Qualcomm. And the Emirates is doing the same, partnering with BlackRock, Microsoft, and the sovereign wealth fund that they have in the Emirates. So I just wanted to mention this because on one side, I think we have to be very careful in following this race because, for example, if you look at artificial intelligence alone, will consume as much as electricity as Japan, like the entire country by 2030. Now, do you think this is sustainable? Like, do you think this is, and water and critical raw materials, which, by the way, are processed 80% in China. So I think that this global planetary race to build those kind of infrastructure in the way we're doing that is certainly not aligned with our climate goals, with our sustainability goals, and possibly it really is, as even Sam Altman said recently, we are seeing a bubble. Yeah, so this is a possibility. But at the same time, I think that we have to be aware that if we are not taking this seriously, like, the chips, the mineral, the compute, energy that we need in Europe to reinforce strategically our own industry, starting from our strengths. For example, like we said before, advanced manufacturing, that we have a lot of capacity, or robotics, next generation robotics, or biotech. Europe has the best and the most important biotech ecosystem in the world. How about quantum? That's going to change, the next generation. So I just wanted to mention this because I think, first of all, in the Euro stack, we understand that we have a very deep dependency, and we are not saying that we're going to change this dependency from a day to the other. But we are saying to Europe, you need a plan. We need a plan because the next generation should be European. And this means, and that's why I started from the gigantic investment gap, because Professor Draghi reminds us that 30% of Europe's investment flies abroad. So when in our report, we are talking about, for example, 300 billion sovereign tech fund for Europe, which I think we need a European sovereign tech fund. And I think that's the magnitude because that's what we need. But we're not only talking about, we're not talking about state budget. We are not only talking about European budget, not even European procurement, which, by the way, is through 2 trillion. So it's enough money if we invest it in our infrastructure. But we're talking about mobilizing pension funds. We're talking about mobilizing sovereign wealth fund and private capital.
So is it mainly a question of money? I mean, new technologies evolve in ecosystems. And isn't that the most important task for the next couple of years. And this is basically something China did and the United States did and Israel is doing when they try to go into new tech fields. They really understand how to build ecosystems. What can Europe learn from that?
Yes, I completely agree. I just wanted to start from the money because usually we get this objection like, where are you taking the money from? I mean, we are under-investing. And actually, no, our money is going abroad. So again, I think, I'm trying to be pragmatic where we should start from. And for example, I really insist, I'll get to the ecosystem, but I really insist that strategic public procurement is a very important and urgent task for Europe. Because if we keep investing our taxpayers' money in funding our own dependency and our own lack of industrial competitiveness, we're not gonna...
the answer will be from many companies and also some governments will be that there are no technological solutions from Europe. I mean, when it comes to cloud systems, many companies say, we would like to stay in Europe, but the technology from AWS is so much better. We can't really move to European solutions.
Yes, and this is the problem. Yes, because we never had a plan and we never invested in our own alternative solutions. Our approach is that we have to be very strategic about analyzing our vulnerabilities and dependencies, then analyzing our strengths and start from our strengths. So I do think that, for example, what I said before, now we have also middle-sized companies, some deep tech growth companies that are growing fast. Actually, the deep tech ecosystem return on investment is higher in Europe than in the US. So we have a lot of talent in biotech, in medtech, in space technology, in advanced robotics. Let's start, for example, taking all this know-how and processes, industrial processes, and move them in the AI age in a European way, where we can control the technology without giving it away to Palantir or to OpenAI. I mean, I'm very clear there. But at the same time, I think that we have to build some of the underlying critical infrastructure that enable us to control our economy.
Yeah. Okay.
And the thing is, for example, if you go to Mr. Schwarz, which now is doing something very interesting in my view.
Schwarz Group, the parent company of Lidl.
Yeah. Yes. And they're doing with Digit, they are proposing a European sovereign cloud, which I think actually meets the real requirement of sovereignty. So it's not about the sovereignty washing we hear from some US big tech. Now, he has invested his own capital. I mean, now I don't want to do advertising for anyone, but I think to me, this seems serious. Investing your own capital, believe that this is part of your strategy to survive and evolve, and also opening it up to other players in a federated way that want to scale. Because one problem is that we are not going to be able to do the Deutschland stack, the French stack, and the this stack. We're going to have to do a European industrial strategy.
And let's make clear what the Eurostack should look like. So what technologies do we really have to be sovereign in and how can we get there? Let's make an action plan here.
Yeah, let's make an action plan. So as I said, I think we have to go in parallel. On one side, I think we need sovereign compute. I think we can, and so we have to, the AI cloud can be European. I think we need to, at the moment, we are buying, I mean, as I told you in the US and EU trade deal, we are buying 40 billion from NVIDIA, one single company. So this is something we also need to understand. Interdependence in today's global supply chain and complexity is the factor. So you want to limit yourself to get into one point of failure or to get to structural choke points where you depend on only one player. So this is something we have to be able to change. So I think, for example, betting on RISC-V or future hardware, also manufactured here in Europe, is good. We have big players, but of course, it's a very complex supply chain. So we're going to have to do our part. Mm-hmm. And then we have a treasure, which is our industrial data. That our companies produce. As we said before, we have a lot of know-how. We have very strong companies in important fields. And this data should become the data commons. I mean, our treasure for building AI spoke models that respond to our public needs and our industrial needs. And then I think we have quick wins, because while it is more difficult to do structural things. For example, I think sovereign cloud for critical infrastructure. So we're not going to compete on the commercial cloud with the hyperscalers, but we can have sovereign European cloud for critical infrastructure and critical services. The European Commission is rolling out a digital ID with the digital euro. I think this should be European because, I mean, here we are in an economic podcast. I think I'm not the only one that is worried about the dollar-backed stablecoin situation and what can this mean for our financial stability if, a lot of the European financial market will be captured by stable coins bypassing the European Central Bank, for example. I mean, this would be a very big hit to our financial stability.
Explain quickly why that is a problem.
Well, it is a problem because, at one side, we are seeing the Genius Act and a very strong move from the US administration to foster the crypto environment without clear rules and without, clear understanding of where this bubble is going. And on the other side, also because we are seeing that the US administration is politicizing the role of the Fed, for example, and also undermining its independence. So I think these combined two things can be very can be a hit to our financial stability and our financial sovereignty. So when it comes to key modules of the digital ecosystem, like the digital identity and the digital euro, I think they should be, controlled by Europeans under our jurisdiction. And just a reminder maybe for the audience, when I was talking about sovereignty washing, what I'm referring to is some big tech companies that are selling their infrastructure, their products as sovereign. But actually, if you go to see the legislation, they are subject to the US Cloud Act, which means that we could be one executive order away from losing access to the critical technologies that are underpinning, our society, our economy, and our democracy.
Nach einer kurzen Unterbrechung geht es gleich weiter. Bleiben Sie dran.
Echter Wandel in Unternehmen ist oft begleitet von Widerständen, Routinen und alten Denkmustern. Der Change-Kongress setzt genau hier an. Er zeigt, wie Transformation dennoch erfolgreich gelingen kann. Wer nur auf neue Tools hofft, wird hier nicht fündig. Wer auf neue Denkanstöße, echte Kontroversen und überraschende Perspektiven setzt, umso mehr. Intensiver Austausch mit wertvollen Kontakten inklusive. Melde dich jetzt an unter change-kongress.de. Mit dem Code PODCAST sparst du 10%.
So we talked a lot about the dependencies and we talked a little bit about possible strategies for Europe. Do you see this might actually change? Do you see the trajectory being changed right now or in the coming months?
I think we need bold leadership, both at the industrial level. So I think we need industrial leadership in Europe at the moment, but also political leadership.
We can agree on that. We need that. But do you see this actually happening?
I think I've seen that happening, for example, when it comes to the Eurostack. At the beginning, it was maybe a good moment, but we certainly had like 200 industry backing the report. We have 4 member states which are on board. We see actually a 10% increase in demand for European alternatives services. So this is reported to us by the industry itself. I think it's not enough, though. I think I see some move, but it's a bit shy still. And I think we really need to have much more European power back in this agenda if we want to succeed. So I think we're still far. And I would really like to give more visibility to what are the European alternatives already in place and how we can pragmatically make sure that they scale and we create in Europe the capabilities to basically, make sure that in the future, basically, if we're going to have another podcast in some years, we're going to say, what is the success? What are the products that you use that are European? And also, what is the impact on our resilience, on our economy? And my prediction is that if Europe wants to defend its own sovereignty and democracy, it is going to have to build something like the Euro stack. And this is coming. So I think we'd better start now than wait another 10 years or 20 years, as I said before, to then ask, what we can do and why we don't have any alternatives.
How did this whole discussion change your personal life? Did you try to live without American products? Did you sell your iPhone?
I actually had a period in my life where I was using a lot of alternative solutions. I find it then very hard when we had all the integrated ecosystem.
You lost all your friends.
I lost all my friends and it became harder and harder. Even just a simple thing, like, I don't even know if you know, we have a fantastic company that's called Proton Mail, which provides email services. And I used to have those kind of alternative services. And then on a certain point, everything was like locked in. So I became locked in as many other people. And I think that now, for example, just the need to have alternative solution for our life to feel more protected, more secure, but also to feel we are contributing to thriving, in Europe, to create value here. I think it's something that I feel and many other people feel. So that's why I'm also going in a very pragmatic route here, because I would want to help the innovators. And we have a lot of people that are actually coming back from the US to Europe to do this here. So we have to create the conditions for this to happen. And we also have to be very aware that the threats that are happening are real.
But you personally had to stop the experiment because it just didn't work.
It didn't work well enough. But I still have my own channels. I have my secure messaging system, my secure email, secure cloud, and I do use those alternatives. And many of those companies are European.
Okay.
Yes. So I do think I have been for a long time in the crypto space, actually more looking at the infrastructure. Since at the beginning of the crypto space, I was looking at the blockchain infrastructure and so on. And I can tell you that some of the main people building this were European. We have some of the best security researchers in the world. Now we have some of the main quantum scientists. I'm working quite a bit now on quantum for this reason, because we have a lot of talent and we don't want to see the next generation of technology and lose that as well.
Okay.
So we need to understand the importance in order to say in 10 years, the next generation will be European.
You were mentioning these people working in blockchain, some of the best in the world at that time. Now you talked about quantum. We have some of the best scientists of the world in Europe right now. Why is it always like that? We do have great researchers, but we don't have the great business models later.
Because we have stopped believing on our own capacity, and we stopped believe that we can do it in Europe, and we can do it in our own way. We can innovate in our own way. So I think at the very root of this is not a question of technology, and it's even not a question of money, because as I showed before, we can mobilize the money, but it's a deep question about our culture. And look, we can be very honest here and maybe come back to my childhood. When we look at AI, AI is a technology that's really shaping and transforming the way we perceive the world. It's aggregating all our data, our, also cultural data, our videos, our films, our music, what we see, even our museum, oeuvre of our museum. So it's really the deep, it goes very deep in what a civilization is about, in what a culture is about. So I strongly believe that Europe has to create its own model of intelligence and its own model of, providing access to the cultural collective intelligence of our society. And it cannot be via few oligopolies that are foreign owned. And in particular, in this moment where we risk ending up with the critical infrastructure that's built somewhere else, underpinned by laws that are not written by us and that are aligning with values that we don't agree with. I mean, this is basically the loss of your autonomy and I think of your culture. So that's why I believe this is a fight to continue to, we have to be somehow optimistic that we have the capacity to build this trajectory in our own way. And that also, and I want to say this maybe for our audience, that we care about the environmental sustainability, the workers' rights. What we have also very good in Europe, because we talk about our SMEs, our deep tech ecosystem. We didn't talk so much about our social model and our our democratic framework. But believe me, I'm here also for that, because I think we have the best social system. We protect the environment, we protect workers, we protect, we are here to show that a different way is possible. That's not the Silicon Valley, capitalism that's actually going more and more authoritarian and the state capitalism of Beijing. Europe can do it also with international alliance, but should defend a third way, another way, yes, in this AI revolution. But I think we have to believe that's possible and mobilize all our power and capacity to do that.
Europe can do it. I think that's a very good point to end. And I think we have
to stay positive, Sebastian.
We have to keep the conversation going. Thank you so much for your thoughts, Francesca Bria, and I hope to speak again very soon.
Thank you very much, Sebastian. It was a pleasure.
Und damit sind wir jetzt auch schon wieder am Ende von Handelsblatt Disrupt zu den wichtigsten aktuellen Zukunftsfragen. Die Redaktion hatte Jan Lutz, Produktion Migo Fecke und Fabian Livret. Wenn euch diese Folge gefallen hat, dann empfehlt uns gerne weiter. Wir hören uns dann nächste Woche Freitag wieder. Bis dahin wünschen wir euch eine gute digitale, aber natürlich auch analoge Zeit. Euer Sebastian Matthes.
Wie gelingt echte digitale Transformation? Finden Sie es heraus beim Handelsblatt Summit Zukunft IT vom 13. bis 15. Oktober in München. Mit dabei Carsten Wildberger, der neue Digitalminister, und viele weitere Top-Speaker aus IT und Wirtschaft. Das Handelsblatt bringt die Entscheiderinnen und Entscheider zusammen. Seien Sie dabei, wenn Zukunft gemacht wird. Sichern Sie sich jetzt 20% Rabatt mit dem Vorteilscode PODCAST unter zukunft-it.jetzt.